So thank you and welcome everybody back after the quick break. Now, I wanted to ask a few questions to Dan. Dan, you talked about traditional and self-publishing, um, and you talked a little bit about established publishers and such. How does the submission process work for traditional publishing?
Usually people try to get in with the big publishers first. And as I was saying, they normally they prefer to deal with agents because agents help them in terms of manpower or people power. It means that the agent is the one sorting through the submissions and finding the good stuff among most of it, which is not so good. And also the agent is using their own judgment in terms of what's going to sell, what's a hot trend, or what is the market looking for right now, and can this author provide it? So they also provide that judgment that the publishing companies value. And so the first step is if you're trying to get in with a big publisher. Now, you may not. Some people may go straight to the small publishers, maybe because they know that they're publishing in a particular niche. Like, let's say you're writing a book of poetry, and you know that probably the big publisher isn't going to be interested, but you know there is a local publisher, or excuse me, a smaller publisher that is particularly, they focus on nature poetry, and you're not expecting to sell thousands, but you do value that they're going to produce a very professional looking book. They'll get you some readings at libraries and events, and you'd be eligible for awards because of the connections and the prestige that comes with the reputation of that particular small publisher. So you may choose to go to a small publisher right away, and that would mean you're submitting directly to them. Your letter would be addressed to them, that small publisher, saying, here's my background. I've been published in these few literary journals. I have a degree, a master's in fine arts, and here's a sample of my poetry. So you may, start out that way. Most people, though, are trying to get in with one of the larger publishers because they want to get in advance. They want to have a marketing team behind them. They hope to maybe make a living from their writing. And obviously, it's a large publisher who can most obviously provide that. So then it means you're finding there are lists online of literary agents who specialize in different areas, and they'll say whether they're currently accepting new authors, and if yes, they'll say in what genres. They'll say, I deal with historical fiction, and I deal with biographies, and I'm accepting new authors. And so you submit your letter to them and your sample of writing, and hope that an agent takes you on. But keep in mind that they probably receive a thousand inquiries, a thousand queries a year or more, and they take maybe two or three, right? So it's highly competitive, but that shouldn't make you lose nerve, because most of what there is being submitted is not at a professional level. So if you know you're producing good work and you're working hard to produce good writing, you definitely should try. And plus, a lot of it is just luck and timing. Maybe they just happen to be trying to build their list of authors and in a particular area, and they click with you. They think you have an interesting background, that you would come across well in interviews or whatever, and they want to work with you. There's an element of luck certainly involved with it. So I hope that addresses. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Thank you. And I get the idea. And especially if you're starting out as a new author, it's better to go to small publishing companies and show your work, that kind of thing. Okay. Another question that I had was, how long does it typically take for a book to get published traditionally?
It can certainly easily take a year or two. I'm just looking at my notes here because there was an author I mentioned during the break, which I assume most of you weren't listening at the break, but maybe you were. An author named Joel Sutherland, who's written nearly 20 books with Scholastics, who's a children's book author. And he does like the Haunted Canada series you might have seen in the bookstores. He's done those. He's the author of those. And he's written 28 books in total. And one thing he said, now this relates to timing and everything. he says with a traditional publisher, you give up a lot of control, but it frees up your time to write your next book. So if you really just love the writing process and expressing yourself and producing books, may want to give that a lot of thought. That that's a big advantage of pursuing the traditional publishers, that you can just focus on the writing, because it's often said that when you self-publish, it's like starting a small business. And it really is, because suddenly you are the marketing person, you are the distribution manager, you're the editor to some extent, you're the first stage editor. All of this is on you. It's like starting a small business. And like anyone who started another kind of small business, that the first 2 or 3 years, generally speaking, you're not taking any profits out, you're not paying yourself a salary. Everything goes back into marketing and building, getting clients and so on. So now, in terms of timing, yeah, it's very typical to be at least a year and maybe more before you finally get published. If you're going the traditional route, if you're self-publishing, it could be a matter of days between your final proofread and your book being on Amazon. Amazon takes about 3 days to review your submission. They use a combination of machine learning, AI, and humans to review your submission to make sure that the quality level is there, that the formatting is right, that there's nothing offensive, horribly offensive. Obviously, you can be R-rated, but you can't, be telling people how to make bombs, for example. So, so they check the content, but it takes like typically maximum 3 days for them. So you can be published very, very quickly. But that also means a lot of people publish way before they should, right? Because they don't have a nice professional cover design. They haven't had it properly proofread. And that hurts the reputation of self-published authors, the fact that there is so much low quality material being pushed onto Amazon.
So it can take longer with a traditional publisher, as you might
Definitely,
say.
yeah.
And for self-publishing, it might be as little as 1 week, as opposed to 1 year.
Sure.
So there are pros and cons in terms of timing, and of course, cost as well. Because you do suggest that you have a good proofwriter, content editor, and a good cover as well.
Absolutely.
So that is what you suggest for a professional looking book. And I did have another question here before we move on to our participants' questions here. How do traditional publishers handle distribution and bookstore placement? So if you are giving it to your content to a traditional publisher, how do they handle distribution and bookstore placement?
Well, in terms of distribution, so they have the relationships already, of course, with the book buyers, including national book buyers for the national chains, and the salespeople will have their regularly scheduled meetings with them where they present their upcoming catalog. So here are the books that we're publishing in the coming season, and here are the titles that we think are particularly exciting that you want to give special placement to. And then publishers also, when you go into a bookstore and there are tables up front or special displays in the window, publishers typically, they're actually paying for that placement, that premium placement. And because if they believe they have an author who's going to be the next big thing, or they believe that the latest book by Stephen King will do even better than usual, they'll pay for that placement at the front of the bookstore. And but first of all, in terms of the distribution, the salespeople are presenting to the book buyers. And they also, of course, go out to the independent bookstores as well. So it's not just about the chains. They have those relationships, and they have salespeople in the various regions that go to those independent bookstores and highlight their catalog and get them in. That's not something as a self-published author, right? You can locally get into bookstores, and this would probably be of interest to some folks here because you're maybe planning self-publish, or you recently have, and you wondering, how do I get into bookstores and so on. I simply, with my Ukraine memoir, I wrote up a letter explaining a little bit of my background and what the book's about and what it's going to retail for and so on, and a sample copy. And I just physically went to the bookstores and asked to speak to the manager who deals with local authors. and I said that I was hoping they'd be interested in stocking the book on consignment in their store, and that and it's interesting. Uh, 2 or 3 of the Indigo stores I went to here in Calgary, even before I brought up the subject, the manager asked me. She says, "Oh yeah, we could probably take some books on consignment." She said, "But are you interested in doing a book signing?" So even before I mentioned the possibility to them, they asked me if I wanted to do a book signing, which was shocking to me because uh, maybe some of you can relate. You assume that, well, book signings are for like celebrities or for people, like you got to persuade them to give you a chance to do that. The fact is that for a bookstore, it doesn't cost anything to let you do a book signing. They put out a table and they mention it on social media, but then it's up to you. They just give you the table and you're here from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock or whatever time period. And they're happy to let you do it because, first of all, customers many of them will just, avoid eye contact because they don't want to be pressured into buying something they don't want. But a lot of customers do like the meeting an author. It's very fascinating. It's intriguing. Uh, it's very interesting to people to meet an author. And they also know that even if you only sell 5 or 10 books in those 3 hours, that's 5 or 10 books they wouldn't have sold otherwise. And it costs them nothing to have you there. So it's actually very, very easy to do a book signing. I would just say manage your expectations because unless you have tons of family and friends who plan to show up for that, which they might, but chances are they already bought your book, right? Because they're friends and family. They already have your book. So chances are you're just going to be there, and maybe you've done an interview or two in advance. Because once you've set up a book signing, you can mention that in a press release and send it out to the radio stations and say, "I'm going to be doing a book signing next week, so I'm happy to come talk on your show." And in fact, that's exactly what I did. Once I had set up a couple of book signings at Indigo stores, I put out a press release to all the local radio and TV, and I got an interview on QR77 on the morning show with Sue and Andy to talk about my book. And I'm sure the fact that I had a book signing already set up was helped me get that interview. Oh yeah, so this is great. I want to share. I do have some more slides that I think would be quite interesting. So um, also, keep in mind what places do you have a connection to? When you publish a book, your hometown will be interested in talking to you, your hometown paper. Or if you're an alumnus of some university or college, they may do an article on you, or at least a little alumni note on you talking about your book. So think about that. So this is Rocky Mountain Outlook. It's the newspaper for Banff and Canmore. Well, I grew up in Canmore, so this is just their online thing, but they actually did a full spread in the print paper. And they mentioned in that article that I was going to be doing a book signing at the Canmore bookstore in a few days. And so I'm sure the book signing helped me get the interview, and then the interview helps draw people to the book signing, right? So on the picture on on the left here is me doing the book signing in Canmore at Cafe Books. The photo on the right is the Indigo Spirit in TD Square downtown. That's where I did one of my book signings. I did another book signing at Indigo Dalhousie. And so both of those Indigo managers, like I said, it was their suggestion to me, would you like to do a book signing? And I was like, sure, yeah, I was happy to do it. And yeah, I was a little bit nervous and I didn't sell tons of books. Now, something I want to share with you, I think this is really interesting too. I asked one of the Indigo managers, I said, how many books is typical like to sell, right? How many? And she said, well, I've seen everything from 0 to 200. And she says, the one who sold 0 is a woman who came in and she was looking at her phone. She's sitting at the table looking at her phone the entire time. Wasn't even looking up at the customers. She was looking at her phone. Didn't sell any books in the 3 hours she was there. The most she'd seen was 200. And the man who sold 200, she said he was an elderly man who had written a memoir, and he would go up to customers in a friendly way. He'd actually approach them as they were browsing in the store. And he'd go up to them and say, can I tell you about how my family hid from the Nazis during World War II? And he did it in a very friendly, non-pushy way. And he sold 200 books in the 3 or 4 hours that he was there. So it was a huge spectrum. So what's wonderful about book signings is you get people come in and the appreciation they show to, like, oh, you've made the effort to write this book, and oh, and what's behind it, and just that connection with the readers is really cool. And if you only sell 5 or 6 books in 3 hours, that's okay, because you still get that experience, you know?
That's wonderful. Then I like the way you transition from a book being in the store, in a local store, to getting signing to being in media. So that all works in favor in terms of marketing the book, right? You
Yes.
getting the name out there and more people buying the book.
Can
And
I add one more thing about distribution? Because Vesna can show another slide that I have. So some of you may be aware that there are stores out there that help people. Like if you make candles, if you make paintings, or you whatever, if you do crafts, then you can rent a shelf in a store, right? And so an example of that is the Hive, which has 2 locations in Claresholm and Nanton, both south of Calgary. And you pay to rent a shelf. This is my shelf in Claresholm. I pay $32 for this shelf, and as you can see, you can fit a lot of books on a shelf that's $32 a month. And they take 10% of sales. So 10% of sales plus $32 a month. But if you are in a community where your books are of interest, so that's just another possibility to consider for distribution. You can also piggyback with someone else. Like, for example, you see there's that one book at the back there, Fat Cat. That's a children's book that my sister wrote and illustrated. And it wasn't published by me. She self-published it, but I offered to put a few copies there on my shelf, right? I've got the space. Why not, right? So you could partner up with a couple other authors, rent a shelf in a place like the Hive in Claresholm or Nanton. And there are some shops in Calgary, they have higher rental rates because of Calgary's higher rental, costs. But there are also a couple of stores, at least a couple in Calgary, on the similar model where you rent a shelf and put your products on there. Okay, so that's something else to consider.
this is wonderful. Thank you.
And another thing, I also give away some free copies. And why would I do that? Well, because when you first publish, reviews are very, very important, meaning I'm publishing on Amazon. So the Amazon rating is very, very important, whether it's 5 stars or whatever, and then the number of reviews that you have. And it's very hard at the start to get reviews, even from people even people who swear that they're going to do a review for you, they somehow don't get to it. So it's very, very frustrating and difficult. Very, I can't, did I say very? I said very. So the free little libraries, sometimes I'll put a couple activity books in there, and in the inside front page, I'll put a little note. I tape a printed note that says, feel free to take this home and keep it. All I ask is that you please do an honest review on Amazon if you do choose, if you choose to. And I want to be clear, Amazon, this is important for new authors or aspiring authors to know. You're allowed to give away free books and to ask for a review. You cannot require the review. You can't say, if you don't give this review, I'm going to take the book back. So you can't make it a requirement. You can just say, I would appreciate a review if you choose to, and you can't ask for a positive review. You can't say, please give my book a positive review. You can say an honest review. And this is different from other products. Amazon does not allow you to give away other types of products in exchange for reviews. They carve out an exception for books because they recognize that in the tradition of publishing, in the long history of publishing, it's been a practice to give out copies of your book for purposes of review. That's okay. So again, you can't require them to do a review, and you can't ask for a positive review, but you can say, here's a free book. I'd appreciate it if you choose to do an honest review of it on Amazon. That'd be great. And so I put them there. And on the right is my son and daughter, Sammy and Sophie. And they're in a barber shop, because the barber shop that I regularly, well, not regularly enough probably, but that I usually go to, I put some free copies of my books, multiple books. And here they are, we were there for Sammy to get a haircut. And so they happen to be looking at their own, my own activity books. But because those reviews are so valuable. So author copies, that's an interesting topic we haven't covered yet. If Vesna could show me the author copies, and then I'll let you get to the questions. Sorry. I just want to make sure we cover these couple of slides that I had. If Vesna could show the author copies. So what are author copies? That simply means copies that the author or publisher has ordered for themselves. Amazon provides that to you at the cost of printing plus shipping. So they're identical. So I want to be clear. When I talk about an author copy, it's the exact same book that a customer gets. It's just called an author copy because it's the author who ordered it at cost, as opposed to the retail copy that the customer ordered. Okay, but it's the same book. It doesn't say author copy on it. It doesn't say anything different. So an author copy, here's an example. Here's my one of my activity books, the Rocky Mountain activity book. You see, I ordered 50 of them. The printing cost each was $3.53. Then there's the shipping, which you can't get away from. It's not like ordering from Amazon Prime, where if you order a certain amount, you get free shipping. There's no free shipping with author copies. You'll always pay it, and it's usually a little over $1 per copy of the book. No matter how many you order, you're going to pay over $1 per copy of the book. Okay, so you can see that for 50 books, I'm paying $53.49 for shipping. So if you divide that total cost, or for 50 books, $241.49 is the total cost. Divide that by 50, you get just under $5 per copy. So for me to order my own book, it costs me about $5 a copy. And it retails, this one retails for 10. So if I sell it in person to acquaintances, friends, family, whoever, I make $5 profit per book, which you'll note is higher than the royalty for online sales, right? And it's higher than well, I don't do an ebook version of an activity book for the obvious reason that it's meant to be colored in and crossword puzzles and so on. So there is no ebook version of this. But so the most profitable way to sell your self-published book is to order author copies and to sell them in person. And you can do it at an event. You can book a table, right, at a craft fair, at an art fair or whatever, and sell your book at a table and make a much higher royalty or profit per book than you would on an online sale. Make sense?
Absolutely. So those are nuggets of knowledge. Thanks for sharing, Dan. At this time, I'm going back to the chat. We do have some questions in there. The first one after the break was from Zonka. What tasks and responsibilities does a self-published author need to manage after publishing their book on Amazon? So what are the tasks and responsibilities of a self-published author, what they need to manage after publishing their book on Amazon?
Well, you need to let the world know about your book. And to go back to the analogy earlier about like self-publishing a book is like adding a grain of sand to the beach, right? Like literally no one will know it's there unless you do something to attract attention to it. There are people like obviously celebrities and people with huge Instagram, followers and a huge number of Instagram followers or Facebook followers or whatever. They have a built-in platform in order to sell their book. But most of us don't have that. We need to do other things and of course, that's marketing is next month, so I don't want to go too much into that. But I would say that becoming familiar with both Facebook ads and Amazon ads would be important you should learn as much as you can about those two things. There's lots of great YouTube videos. There's lots of good information out there on Facebook ads and Amazon ads. So being familiar with that, and you really should have a strategy. You should make, just like like I said, it's like having a small business. You need a marketing plan. So think about, what bookstores you'd like to get into, which media outlets might want to interview you, what about blogs, right? Excuse me, I meant to say podcasts, or maybe blogs too, but there may be podcasts who are interested in, they're like romance writer podcasts, right? So if you wrote a romance novel, then you would reach out, of course, to romance novel podcasts. And if you are writing on a nonfiction topic, then about history or something, then of course you'd look for podcasts talking about history. So you should think about all of that in advance, and then you put that plan into place. Well, even before you publish, you should have put some of those elements of the plan into place in terms of getting the word out, right? Long before you publish, you should have been trying to build up an audience on your social media so that people are aware that the book is coming, right? You don't wait until the book's available to then start marketing it. The marketing has to come way before that. And so, yeah, I mean, we've talked about some things that obviously take place after the publication in terms of physically bringing samples of your book to bookstores and asking to place it on consignment. If you place it on consignment, the way that works is you tell them the retail price that the book sells for, that you want it to sell for, and they give you 60%. That's the normal rate. So if you say it's a $15 book, sell it for 15. When they sell it, they'll give you 60% of the 15, and they keep 40. And so then you have to do the math when you subtract your author copy cost, is it worth it to you? And usually it is. Like, even if you're selling a $15 book, there might be $3 or $4 profit per book, right? When you subtract the $5 author copy cost, there's $3 or $4 per book. And keep in mind too, in the future, if that bookstore does well, like they sell your book, they take 10 copies from you and they sell them, well, you can have Amazon directly ship your author copies to them. You don't have to drive out to Canmore and bring them 10 more or 20 more. You can go in, make an order your author copies and change the shipping address to that bookstore. And Amazon is fine with that. Your author copies are to do with whatever you want with. You can sell them at fairs. You can give them away as free promos or review copies. You can sell them on consignment in bookstores. You can have a shelf in the place like the Hive and sell them. They're yours to do with as you wish.
Okay. Sounds good. So you covered a number of points here. One was about their tasks and responsibilities after self-publishing, which is marketing and starting it beforehand, creating that anticipation even before the book is out. And you also talked about ordering author copies and shipping it to the store itself so that you still can make a profit out of it. So that's wonderful. Thanks again, Dan. I'm going to the next question here. It's from Vipin. When publishing on Amazon, does the number of pages matter? Is there a threshold that is good to hit?
There's two main factors in the printing cost is number of pages and whether you're doing color on the inside. Color on the inside adds at least $1 per book. And if it's premium color, then it could be more than $2 a copy. So whether it's a color interior and number of pages is less of a factor. Like the difference between a 120-page book and a 150-page book is probably 50 cents a copy or something. It's pretty small, but the difference between black and white interior and a color interior, like I said, is probably at least a couple bucks a book. So that makes the big difference. So that's a big thing to consider, whether you really need color on the interior. With my Ukraine memoir, I have a whole bunch of photos in it, but I chose to go with black and white photos because I didn't feel like color was necessary, just like a newspaper article usually has black and white photos. But for example, so one of the books I recently published, this one is a cartoon book, and some of the cartoons inside are black and white, but just like cartoons in the newspaper where every Sunday, right, usually the Sunday paper has the color ones, then we have some color ones. And we thought it was worth the extra expense to pay for the color interior, which meant that the book cost we had to charge more. So this book, it's 150 pages. Yeah, 150 pages. And we retail it for $20 because the printing cost, including shipping, is about $11 or $12 per book. So $12 printing, as opposed to one of my activity books, right? With the activity books, sorry, I'm losing the image there, but the activity book, all black and white interior, right? So that's why this 86-page activity book is only a $5 cost, including shipping, to get these. So big difference if you're having the color interior.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Because you have so many experiences with publishing multiple books, you are able to answer about black and white and number of pages as well. Thanks for that. Our next question is from Vidat. Intellectual property. What about the title of the book? Is there any restriction, rules? The title has been used before. So she's wondering about the title of the book and the restrictions, rules around it, whether the title has been used or not.
Oh, that's a great question. And It's a pretty straightforward answer, fortunately. And the answer is that titles cannot be copyrighted because they're short. The courts don't believe that they are unique enough to deserve copyright. In other words, there are tons of books with a title like Outsider, for example, or Broken. These are, you can search Amazon and you'll see 10, 12 different books at least with that particular title, because titles themselves are not subject to copyright. The interior, of course, the body of the work is, because the body of the work is the unique expression of your idea, right? That's what's copyrighted, the unique expression of an idea. Titles are considered too short. Here's my law background, I guess, coming in here. I'm sounding like a lawyer, aren't I? So the short answer is you can use the same title as a book that's already out there. That's the short answer. Now, if you want to differentiate your book, let's say you want to call your book Broken, and you see there's a lot of books called Broken, and you want to differentiate, you don't want to be confused with someone else's book, then the easy solution is simply to add a subtitle to it, right? Broken, My Struggles with Autism, or whatever it is, whatever it is. Offer a subtitle that makes it more clear what the specific focus of your book is, and then it'll stand out from the others that have a similar title.
Thank you. I didn't know that, Dan, that you could use a title that's already existing, right?
Yes.
So you cannot copyright the title. So thanks for
Now,
that.
let me make one caveat, to say one thing there. Do not use trademarks in your titles. Do not use the word Pokemon in your title. Do not use the name of a Disney princess in your title. Do not use other people's intellectual property in your title. That'll get you shut down. Amazon will remove your book, and you might hear from Disney's lawyers if you call it the Cinderella activity book. Don't do that. But other than trademarks, like specific, characters owned by other companies, it's fine to use the title that's the same as another book.
So be careful with the trademarks.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got one more question here from Glenn. I'm considering using some proceeds to fund a university program. Any insights?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat that?
Glenn says, I'm considering using some of the proceeds to fund a university program. Any insights? Glenn, do you want
So I
to
assume he means proceeds from his book, like he wants some of the royalties to go towards a university.
I believe so. Unless, Glenn, you can come off mute and specify.
Yeah, please elaborate.
Glenn is trying to unmute.
It might be more of a marketing question than anything. So maybe it should be our next session, but I'm just curious in terms of, I'm just thinking about maybe increasing my audience by providing some of the proceeds from the book to, I guess, entice interest. I'm just curious what your experience has been.
Well, okay, so this might be relevant. So one of the authors I published, he did a children's book recently called In the Heart of the Forest, and it's about his experiences with PTSD. And he has a daughter, and he wanted a book that would help people who've experienced PTSD to explain to their children why they may sometimes be more distant and be dealing with these issues. And the previous book he did to that one was regarding, he lost a whole bunch of weight because he wanted to be active with his daughter, and he realized he's risking his health because he was very overweight. And it was coincidentally, you might guess that it was because of this. He had a very violent incident in his late teens where he almost died from being stabbed by multiple times by 3 people. So it's caused these issues. But the point is that with the first book called The Great Race, My Daddy and Me, he would, in his materials, he would say that portion of the proceeds were going to charity, and a part of the proceeds were going to his daughters, and another girl who did the illustrations would go to their future education funds. So he was doing a book where proceeds are going to a good cause. And he didn't feel like it made a difference. It certainly, here's what I would say. Anything you can do that goes into a press release or goes into an email that you send to a podcast host or a radio host or whatever, that they can, that will give them a reason to talk to you, to give you a reason to give you that platform, is a good thing. So I would say that if you have, funds going to a university program, then it helps. It gives you an angle where the editor or the publisher or the producer has an extra reason to consider giving you that interview. And then hopefully those interviews translate into more sales and publicity. So in that way, I would say it's a good thing, but you need to make sure you do leverage it in that way. And also doing that also means that there may be influencers, I hate to use that term, but there may be people with large followings on social media where if they become aware of it, they may be willing to repost or retweet or whatever the terminology is. They may be willing to help get that word out. So in other words, you could do a social media post where you put their social media handle in it, in the post so that they see it, and they may choose then to repost it. And this guy I'm talking about, who I recently published, Dave Murphy, he's had a lot of success with that, where he will say that he's published a book about PTSD, and he will put the handle for like D. Snyder with Twisted Sister. He'll put his handle in there, and then D. Snyder, or more likely one of his assistants, sees that and reposts it. And of course, he has like 130,000 followers or something on Instagram, and so it gets that wider audience because, well, I didn't state this, but D. Snyder in the past has advocated for mental health issues. So it's an issue that particular celebrity has in the past supported, and therefore is more likely to repost. And so in the same way, you can think about the kinds of people who may be a supporter of what you're doing, and make sure it comes to their attention, and you may get that wider exposure. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, for the question, and thanks, Dan, for explaining it in detail. We have time for one more question, and we are wrapping up the session after. So the last question that I want to take is from Darlene Davis. What advice do you have for pricing a book on Amazon? Can you change the price after it has been published? Great question. I love questions that have definite answers. And the answer is definitely yes, you can change it. And you can, as far as I know, you can change it as often as you want, but you can change the price and set it at whatever you want. Now, in terms of how to set the price, there are different thoughts on this. Some book marketers will say that in certain categories, it's good to just have the price at the bare minimum at the start, maybe even take no royalty at the beginning until you get a certain number of reviews, because then you can always increase the price later. Because without the reviews, and I apologize, so I'm going into a bit of the next workshop, but if you don't have the reviews, then the advertising isn't effective, because the advertising on Facebook or Amazon gets people to look at your listing. But if they come to the listing and there are no reviews or only one or two, they won't be converted into actual buyers. They'll go, oh, interesting book, but I'm not confident that it is a good quality book because there's no reviews, or there's very few reviews. So you've wasted those advertising dollars, right? You paid for that click, you paid for that Facebook ad that got them there, but they don't end up buying because they don't have the social validation, or whatever you want to call it, that the reviews provide. So one strategy that some people try is, for the first few weeks or months, they set the price at the bare minimum, getting them like only less than $1 per book in royalties, so that to give that as an extra incentive for people to buy, and in the hope that it'll lead to reviews. And once they have 10, 20 reviews, then they raise the price so they're getting a reasonable royalty out of it. But you can adjust your price as you wish. Something else is, if you've also offered an ebook version, you can also do short-term promos. You can even offer a free promo. Amazon lets you say for the next day or the next 2 days or 3 days that the book's offered for free.
And why would an author do that? Mostly because they hope that it'll lead to reviews. It can also, the author I was talking about, Dave Murphy, he just the last 2 days, he offered his book for free, this In the Heart of the Forest, and he got a bunch of reviews, like 6 or 7 reviews in those 2 days. And a couple of people told him that once they saw the free book, they decided they wanted to buy a print copy. So just because you're offering it free doesn't mean you don't get any sales. People may like it and decide they want a physical book, especially if it's a children's book where children love to physically hold a book. So that's a long answer, but definitely you can set the price whatever you want. You look for books that are comparable, right? That's usually the starting point. You look at, oh, if I'm publishing an activity book that's 86 pages like this one that I just published, so I look at other activity books that are about the same length that are also black and white on the inside, and then I try to go a little bit below that, right? That's usually what I do. Just look for comparable books, offer something similar, unless I were to use that strategy I mentioned, which is offer basically at cost until I get reviews. I haven't tried that yet, but when I look at some of my books and it's like, why do I only have 1 or 2 reviews there? It's very tempting to just say, I'm going to offer it at cost until I get more reviews, you know?
Those are some excellent points. Thank you, Dan. To look at similar books, get as many reviews as possible, even offer the book for free for some time to gain those reviews. And again, the prices can be changed anytime
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
want. Yeah. I think that answers your question, Darlene. I wanted to ask one more time if anybody else has any questions before we go. I will look into the chat box for one more minute.
Now, can I add something?
For sure.
I hope you all get published if you haven't already been, and that you, whether it's traditional or self-publishing, because both have advantages, as I've mentioned. There's no one perfect way. And if you do get to do a book signing, it can be uncomfortable because a lot of creative types, authors, they're kind of introverted, right? Writing is very solitary. You spend months or years alone, and it's very uncomfortable then putting yourself out there at a book signing or whatever. And one thing you got to do is make it comfortable for people to approach you. And so if you ever do a book signing, like for example, print up bookmarks. I just printed these. It's really hard to see. I'll hold it directly in front of me. For an author that I just published, I showed you one of his books. He did the illustrations for the Welcome to Alberta activity book, and he did this I published this collection of cartoons, Western themed cartoons. Anyways, I printed up these bookmarks so that he will have them at the table when he does the book signings. So I'm setting up book signings for him in the next few days, actually. And I did the same thing with my Ukraine book. I had bookmarks printed up that had the front and back cover of my book on it and my image as well on it. And it's an icebreaker because people are walking by, they don't really know what's going on. Who are you? Are you going to give me a hard sell or not? You know, and you just say, would you like a free bookmark? And they go, oh, sure, thanks. And then they glance at your book and they go, oh, you wrote a book about Ukraine. Yeah. And then you start telling about your experiences. And so it's an icebreaker, and it's more comfortable for you and it's more comfortable for them that you've just offered them something free. And, you know, these were printed up by a digital post, and it's like $15 for 100 of them. So 15 cents each, 15 cents each for a nice little, and you can imagine other ways that these can be used, not just at a book signing. And also get a couple of posters printed up. I had a poster printed up of the front cover and the back cover, $6 each for a big poster that you can just tape to the front of the table so that people from a distance can see what book you have available, because they don't want to come up close to a stranger and look at the book and maybe get the hard sell. But if they can see from a distance what your book is, they might come approach. So just a couple of thoughts about book signings, because I know that's very, a lot of people dream of that experience, and it is a great experience to have. You really feel like a real author when you're sitting there signing books. It's a cool experience.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Again, those are simple techniques to have. You can attract people to your booth by having a bookmark, having a large poster. So those are great things to have. Thanks for sharing all that information, Dan. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge about book publishing, because you've published many books and many different genres, right? So it is great to have your knowledge. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And now it's the time to wrap up. I think we have covered most of the questions here. Now I'd like to call upon Vesna.